My dear friends, I hope this finds you well. As many of you know, over the past few months, really half a year of this challenging year, I've been receiving a lot of comfort from a powerful podcast called On Being with a woman named Krista Tippett, and I've spoken about the podcast and some of her guests with you in the past. And today I listened to another episode that they just put out in reference, in response to all the challenges that we are facing. And it's with a woman named Pauline Boss. And Pauline Boss is a psychologist and a professor. And she is someone who has coined the phrase ambiguous loss. Ambiguous loss. And this is what she relates to individuals who, God forbid, have gone through an experience of mourning that there is something missing to it. And let me explain. We're talking about situations where, God forbid, people have a loved one who disappeared. A loved one who was kidnapped, unfortunately, as it happens very often in certain places in South America, as she writes about. She spoke about this sort of loss in response to September 11th, and people not having, not knowing really where their loved ones went and what happened to their bodies. And she also relates this idea of ambiguous loss to individuals whose loved ones are suffering with dementia and Alzheimer's, where they're there, but yet they're not there. And this is she speaks about the challenges of guiding people in these situations, and this is really her specialty. And there's a challenge of being comforted in those situations because there's no closure to it. And she speaks about how there's really no closure ever in mourning, but there's no finality to it. You don't know, and the fact that you don't know and that it's so open, it holds a person back from from healing. And I thought this was a really interesting idea because many of you might be familiar with the idea that when Yaakov learned that his son Yosef was killed, as the brothers tell Yaakov, they say that he was torn up by a wild animal. It says that Yaakov refused to be comforted. Now, our sages say he refused to be comforted because he actually deep down knew somehow that Yosef wasn't dead. But maybe he refused to be comforted because there was no body before him. He was missing. There was no act of burial, which is such an essential part of the mourning process. Maybe, just maybe. But what Pauline Boss suggests, and this is such a powerful idea, the way in which she tries to help people move forward in their life. They're always going to deal with grief, but the way that she wants to help people move forward is she says that people need to hold two truths in their mind at the same time. You have to bring people to that place, the ability to kind of think in this dynamic way. That on one hand, the person is not with them anymore. On one hand, the person is no longer. But on the other hand, there's still blessing, and there's still forward movement in life, and there are other things to be grateful for. And she tries to guide people in coming to accept and understand those and hold those two truths in their mind at the same time. And I thought this is something that we can apply to the time of year that we are in, and really the state of the world that we find ourselves in right now. This Shabbat is, of course, Shabbat Chazon, the Shabbat of vision, Parshat Devarim. As we move close, next week is Tisha B'Av. And Shabbat Chazon gets its name from the vision of Yeshayahu, the prophet Yeshayahu, who speaks about Yerushalayim going to be destroyed, and how this beautiful city is fallen, and how the ruling class and the rulers and the priests have violated who they were supposed to be and taken advantage of the poor, and the poor are destitute and people are hungry. And so Yeshayahu has this vision of the truth of reality, of how broken it is and how much is missing and how much pain there is in the world. That's the chazon, that's the vision. But on the other hand, you might be familiar with the more Hasidic tradition of what the chazon, the Shabbat chazon, what the vision is in this week's, as we move into this Shabbat and towards Tisha B'Av. Or Leib Yitzchak of Berditchev says that on this Shabbat, the vision is that every person, should they choose and should they be sensitive to it, every person can get access to a vision of the third temple. We can foresee the future redemption. And so I sometimes feel like that's strange. Like there's like a complete dissonance between this idea of the vision of Yeshayahu and the vision of, let's say, Reb Leib Yitzchak of Berditchev, the vision of the rebuilt temple. But maybe this is exactly what Pauline Boss is talking about, of us having the ability to hold these two truths in our mind at the same time. On one hand, we must be able to look into the world and see the brokenness. On one hand, we must be able to see what is the real darkness that's in this world. We must understand that the temple, the Beit HaMikdash, is in ruins, and that even though the Jewish people are back in the land of Israel, it's so complex, so complicated. And there's so much injustice, and so much pain, and so much hurt. But on the other hand, there's a process in play. On the other hand, there is good, and there is healing, and there is rebuilding, and there is fixing. Right now. And the Beit HaMikdash, this kind of ethereal, ephemeral concept, yes, it's beyond, but it's also happening. It's also here right now. And so too in our lives right now, and the stresses that you and I are experiencing, and especially those of us here in Victoria, and struggling with, with the ongoing lockdown and the financial stress and the family stress and all, and people getting sick, and it's a complex situation. We don't hide from the difficulty. We don't run away from it. We recognize it. We hold that truth. It's a truth. But on the other hand, we must not lose sight of the other truth of the goodness, of the kindness, and of the peace, and of the healing that exists right now. Right now. So we hold these two things in mind. We hold these two things in mind. We as a Jewish people, we force ourselves every year to hold on to this loss. That's a profound thing. So many people run away from loss. So many cultures try to run away from it. We hold on to it. We bring it down. We pass it down from generation to generation because we know just how important it is. We know just how important it is. We hold that loss. We sit with it. But our tradition also teaches us that we need to sit with what we do have, with the goodness and the kindness. And when we hold them together and we don't run away, we can then make a conscious choice in our own way to accentuate the healing, to increase the light, to increase the love, to increase the connection. That is our job right now. Whatever capacity that we have, even though a lot of it's virtual, we can reach out to people we care about. We can do what we need to do to make people feel loved and supported. It's difficult right now. People are struggling. But we all have a role to play. We all have a role to play in the healing of the people in front of us, and also in the healing of this world. May Hashem allow this to be the final Shabbat Chazon of the Chazon of Yeshayahu, of seeing the destitute, of seeing the injustice, of seeing the difficulty in the darkness, and may He bring us into the chazon of Reb Lev Yitzchak of Berditchev, a vision of rebuilding, a vision of healing, a vision of redemption. May it come from vision and be actualized this coming week.